1 second. I am here for BodySlam.net, and I'm here with Mateo Valentine, part of 1.5 of the tag team Big Mood at CSW Chicago Style Wrestling. Mateo, baby, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing absolutely fantastic today. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, because you know I love you, and also I have to say it. I know I've already said it about 1,000,000 times so far, but I love the hair, and I
Thanks.
love that our nail and my nails match your hair right now.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Shout out to Wild Root Hair Studio in the city in Chicago right now because I look so good right now.
You look absolutely fabulous. I shouldn't be vaping. I should be a good girl. And no, you are not touching that vape tomorrow. Hands
Okay.
up.
Oh, come on. I'm kidding. I'm not.
Please,
Everybody uses it. Everybody uses it. I'm
mine is the
surprised
community
no one
vape.
has gotten sick from it.
I was like, mine's a community vape, and y'all wonder why this is supposed to be the last one. I'm supposed to be quit.
Yeah. I'm supposed to quit too. Kids, don't vape.
Yeah,
Don't vape,
please
don't smoke.
don't vape. Don't do it. Not worth it. So, as I mentioned before, when we were discussing doing the interview, there were a few points that I wanted to touch on. Some may be sensitive, so if at any point
Of
it's
course.
not really a subject you want to talk about, we can definitely avoid it, or we can tackle it however you want. It's the ball's in your court, but since you are essentially the trifecta, as I call it, for AAPI, Mental Health Awareness Month, and of course next month, Pride.
Pride,
Our
baby.
month. I just want to talk a little bit about that as it pertains to both yourself and within wrestling as a whole, because those communities intersect whether a lot of people believe it or not. So,
Exactly,
of
exactly.
course, touching upon, of course, the big one, since it is AAPI month right now for the layman, for all the laymen out there who have never heard of it, which would be most people of my shade. Would you like to explain to our audience what AAPI stands for and what it
Yes, of course. AAPI, it stands for Asian American Pacific Islander, and it also counts when you also say AAPINH, which NH also stands for Native Hawaiian. And so this month having, AAPI month is so important to me because it recognizes all of the Asians, all the Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiians, all the Polynesians, you know, Indians. If you're Asian, it's meant to celebrate. And especially in professional wrestling, especially in the indie scene, it's just like um in the Midwest, especially where I am in Chicago, I don't have a lot of Asian wrestlers and all that stuff. Yes, there's people, there's TAU up in Wisconsin, which I'm very happy about. There is the Lightning Kid here in Chicago that I'm happy that he's there too. Obviously, there's Sue Young and everything like that, and just having those kinds of people there just makes me so comfortable, and having that kind of representation there is so important for me, as it is one of my pillars as an entertainer.
And of course, given that you are Filipino, and we've got, as I mentioned, we've got Pride Month coming next month. It's not just like with AAPI that has a smaller representation, especially here in the Midwest, where it's white, but also just like the queer community. We have a strong queer community, especially in the Midwest, but it is relatively small in comparison to West Coast or East
Yeah,
Coast, or even maybe down south. How do you find those two intersecting, especially when queerness is still so shunned and still looked down on within marginalized communities?
of course, it's the fact that with my intersectionality of being Filipino and queer, it can be used as a, what's it called? I don't know how to say it. It's, thank God for Drag Race Philippines, that it shows what queer culture is like in the Philippines, which is very high camp, very feminine, very all that. And I attribute to that in my culture, having it come into my wrestling life. Yes, it does empower me because it is part of, it's like kids watch Drag Race Philippines. It's like if you think that they are, you know, too much or too camp, it's like that's us. That's my culture right there with the queers and everything like that. But it's such a marginalized community where I am, because it's just like sometimes I'm not taken as seriously because of the fact that I am such a character. And so that kind of charisma is seen as a crutch to being, oh, in nowadays in the current contemporary kind of pro wrestling where it's all combat based, and it's very not spot heavy, but it's just very much, it's just like you go for a move, big move, big move, big move, you know, the Will Ospreys versus the Speedball Mike Bailey matches, you know what I mean? And so you have someone like me who has a ton of charisma, and, you know, people don't think that I can deliver those kinds of matches, but
and people are like basically I mean, I feel like we are seeing a very subtle shift between, like, it was very character based, obviously in the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, all the way until like that brief period, I would say between like 2012 to the inception of AEW in 2019, where it was very combat based, especially when you went down to NXT, where they were given the chance to form those characters, but it had very much an indie vibe. So I feel like we're subtly making that shift back into more character-based characters instead of combat-based characters. And it's got to be interesting, especially within the indie scene where there is such an emphasis on just straight wrestling and combat, not so much developing characters, because there's no massive audience
yeah,
to cater to. So it's like, I imagine that shift, especially when you're dealing with queer tropes and
oh
trying
yeah.
to mantle them, it's got to be an interesting terrain to navigate.
Of course it is. It is such a challenging thing to navigate, because it's just like, oh, like with all the queer tropes, it's like sexual or like, you know, sensual or very, you know, emasculating and everything like that, which is a very dangerous thing when it comes to, you know, toxic masculinity and everything like that. But I like to say that even though they do sound tropey and everything like that, I embrace it, because if that's what you're going to see me as, then I'll take it. But then as the match keeps on going, you'll be able to see the third dimension of me, you know. I like to have people have a expectation of me. Like when I make my entrance, I'm very gay, I'm very queer, I'm very like shake my ass, clack that fan, you know, be very very very, you know, charismatic, queer. You know, the first 10 seconds, you know who I am. And so you set up that expectation. And so I am very grateful with pro wrestling that I am able throughout, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15, 20, that I get to show a 3D version of setting up the expectation of me and then subverting it.
I would say, especially when you actually do, I don't know. I don't know if I want to say brutal. I want to say calculating, coming after Sierra, just with the freaking chair. which is so many levels of fucked up. How like rude.
When it comes to that CSW tag team title with Moody and I have zero remorse of what I do because I am 100% focused on that title. I am a former Chicago Style Wrestling Tag Team Champion. I am practically, I don't know if I could say it, I'm the first Asian American champion at Chicago Style Wrestling. Probably one of the first queer champion in Chicago Style Wrestling history. I want to continue my legacy there because guess what? There isn't a person like me at Chicago Style Wrestling. And I want to show those kinds of people that at Chicago Style Wrestling, all forms are accepted.
No, there definitely is not. I don't even, it's like the only person who would probably come close is me, but I'd actually have to get in the ring, and that's never happened. I'm too old.
I'll break my
ass on my first bump.
Yeah. There is also Joey Mayberry and Moondog Greg Murray as well. But I would love to still be part of that pedestal of that being part of the Chicago Style Wrestling Tag Team Champion because I have worked my ass off to become that representation, that person, everything, all the trials and tribulations that I have gone through. That tag team championship with Moody, the first time it felt gratifying, it felt validating. This time, winning that championship is accomplishment to show that all the crap that I went through is worth it because now they have to recognize again this queer as a champion.
As long as the hate keepers don't come around to ruin the day again anytime soon.
I mean, the girls are fighting, so I don't think that they're focused.
It's, you know them. It's a matter of time. As long as they stay at bay and are obsessed with each other, I think that once you do snag those titles again, it's going to be a nice, long, lengthy reign. All hail the king and queen. And speaking, of course, you know, we're touching back on the wrestling. Touching back into what you were saying about how growing up there was very little representation back then and now, especially here. Like who did you
talking about queer Asian representation because it's just like there are, when it comes to the main product, there are plenty of Asian Pacific Islander representation. We're talking, I'm referring to queer Asian or just Asian American in the independent scene right now.
Well, I was going to touch on was whether not maybe so much queer, but Asian American, like being that even when I remember growing up, really didn't have that, especially like in the golden era, and everything was just like a hokey stereotype because and Vince McMahon.
You had like the head shrinkers, you had Yokozuna and all that. And so
who did you find yourself gravitating towards for inspiration or as a role model given that lack? Because like me, I had no lack, but you obviously did.
The Usos. What I loved about it is that, they embrace their culture. I remember, seeing them do the haka in tribute to their culture with the face paint and everything like that. And then when they turned heel, that's when they turned into the Usos.
Oh God, when they did the heel turn, I was just like, what is this? I don't know what this is, but I love it. I love it.
It's just like they embrace their culture and then they just literally turn into, I'm going to be who I want to be. And that's Samoan badasses. And so just like when I first started training it's just like, yes, people that know me, I am entirely women's wrestling based. I am entirely Divas era based and all and everything of that form. But there are there are a few and far in between male wrestlers that I looked up to just to see what's going on. And the Usos were the tag team for me, where it was just like they of a transformation. And so it was just like and so they were it for me when it taught me how to essentially just be myself and subvert the stereotypes and the tropes.
I will say because of course I know that you are highly supportive of women's wrestling, all about the Divas era, just like Joey. I will say your Northern Lights suplex could put Alicia Fox to shame.
Oh, thank you. I like to say I
hope one day she actually gets. I hope one day she actually gets to see it.
I hope one day it's like it'll get posted. I tag Victor. I tag Vix Crow into it, and I get her stamp of approval. I would die. I'm sorry, Ashton Starr. I know she is the end all be all for you, but if I could get a call out from her with my Northern Lights suplex.
Don't be starting no interterritory wars on my interview now.
I'm not trying to start anything. I love you. I love Ashton. I love everything.
We love you.
But I just want that kind. It's like having that kind of recognition. It happened with Cassidy Lee. Now I want Vix Crow.
So making a subtle shift, since we are wrapped up in 2 months and we got a third one coming up, and we've got that major intersection right here. Since we've already tackled AAPI, we've tackled Pride Month, and we have to go into Mental Awareness Month. Again, I know it can be a touchy subject, depends on however open you want to be.
I can say it. I don't care. It's like I am openly depressed. I like to say, guess who found out shit from my therapist and all that stuff all the time when I'm with my friends and all. You've probably heard me say that, and I get to say that I am struggling with anxiety and depression. I get to say that I am okay to say that I am experiencing bipolar 2, which is you experience more of the depressive effects than the manic effects. And it is a struggle. It is a struggle, but it is so nice to hear when you hear someone struggle with you, because you don't have to feel that alone. We live in this kind of world right now where social media and depicts what's a good life and everything like that. And so that can get into your brain a lot. And so just having that solidarity of being like, yo, I'm feeling the same way. Yo, I'm feeling that same anxiety. It gives me a sense of that relief, being like, I'm not suffering alone. Of course, also, y'all get therapy. Get therapy, because it is the best thing. And also, if you need pharmaceutical help as well, get that too. I get to say that I'm proudly on meds for it too, and I have no shame about it.
Can't make them, store bought is fine.
Yeah. And mental health is so real, especially when it comes to pro wrestling, because whether you guys like it or not, pro wrestling is show business. And we often compare and contrast and see and highlight what is wrong with us more than what is right with us. We are our most worst enemies at a lot of times. And so what we think is perfect is already seen as perfect in other people's eyes. And we don't need to change anything about us.
And especially as you mentioned, as it comes to pro wrestling, it feels like when since there's like what, a 10-year gap between us, 10 years doesn't seem like much, but in these kinds of subjects it's actually a very long time, because what was acceptable for you guys to talk about was not stuff that we could talk about. And when it comes into wrestling, it's talking about mental health and mental struggles was even more taboo. How many wrestlers did we lose to addiction, to suicide, to everything, because they couldn't talk about it? And like, even now there's still some resistance within wrestling to be open about that. Like, bless Will Ospreay for going on Hey EW and talking about autism and ADHD, and a lot of people loved hearing about it. And there was still some freaking backlash because, oh, ADHD isn't real, and oh, everybody's autistic, and it's like, shut up, please shut up.
Yeah, it's very important to really especially talk about mental health and professional wrestling, because we all go through it. We all go through it one time or experience it all the time. And there's nothing wrong with us. You know, a lot of people say, you know, if there is, you know, if you are suffering a mental illness, there is quote unquote something wrong with you. And so that creates that kind of like, can we trust this person to do something, blah, 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 where I'm just like, I'm feeling sad, but let's have fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, I mean, the way I see it, if you're sick, like, you know me, I get sick every freaking month because my freaking defective lungs, my kingdom for a new set of lungs that actually function. But I get sick all the time. So what do? I go to the doctor, I go get meds. Like, I don't understand why people wouldn't see mental illness as the same. It's like, the whole idea of, oh, it's in your head. Yes, it is literally in my head. It's my brain. My brain is sick. I need meds. You go to the doctor when you go to the hospital when you break your bone. You go to the doctor when you have the flu. Why wouldn't you go to a therapist if you got something wrong up there? Because, like, it's your brain. Your brain literally controls everything in your body. Why wouldn't you want it to be operating at optimal speed?
Yep.
Melding, because I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. So I grew up poor white trailer trash. I can admit that right now. Poor white trailer trash. I was what Kid Rock said he wanted to be.
Oh my God.
And therapy was looked down upon as a rich person thing.
Yeah. Whereas for me, as even I like to say that I am privileged to say I grew up, you know, middle class Filipino, you know, but with my culture, with Asian culture, especially if we're going to talk about the intersectionality of Asian, you know, Asian culture with mental health, it is very misunderstood, especially because I am first generation. You know, there's the talk of, why are you sad? You have a home, you have food, you have this, you know, the whole compare contrast kind of thing with you know, parents saying, it's just like, when I was at the motherland, you know, I only, you know, I lived in a hut, you know, I didn't have that much, and now here, you know, you're given everything. And so there is such a stigma, you know, I understand the stigma of it, but again, I would like to say that my thoughts are not a monolith, but I like to say, in my own point of view, everyone has experienced going through a depression, whether they knew it or not. And so that's what I like to say, that everyone needs to understand that mental illness affects everyone and affects everything. And it is okay to talk about it, because you never know what's going on in people's lives. And you never know who is going to be that helper, or who's going to be that or what's going to be that thing that clicks to help them get them out of the mental anguish that they are going through. So if there's one thing that comes out of this interview regarding mental health, is just talk about it. Ask someone how they're feeling, ask them, personally, I know you say you're okay, but it's just like, if you're road buddies with people, you're on the road for 4 hours straight, talk, with your close buddies, just ask them. It's just like, how are you truly feeling? And believe me, that passes by the road trip really well, but also it brings you guys closer together, whether you guys knew it or not.
Yeah, it's like, it's honestly, it's like as much of a pain in the ass as road trips can be, especially like the really long ones, because like, me and our other production guy Derek, every month 7 hours up north, 7 hours back
back, and then if it's Revolver, it is a good 8 to 10 hours,
depending on where Revolver's at. We haven't done Revolver in a while. Before we go, as I've mentioned, CSW, since you were one half of the tag team Big Mood, and we do have a show tonight.
Bro, oh yeah, tonight
we got a show tonight. You got a match. You are up against Adam Stallion and Cypher and the tag team champions, Joey Jet Avalon and Sierra. How we feeling? What are our thoughts?
I'm feeling confident. I don't know if it's for the titles, but still, it is a way to show dominance and show people that we, meaning Moody and I, have been part of the tag team division for so long, and we are carrying it. We are the top tag team, even without the belts.
Basically,
only losers lose, and we carry ourselves as winners each and every time that we step on that goddamn ring. And so I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of Joey Jet Avalon, Sierra, Adam Stallion. I think Cypher's sexy, so maybe some seduction might be going on, but still, I'm not afraid.
Arguably the faces of the division, with or without the titles.
With or without the titles, we are the faces of the tag division. But having those tag team titles just means accomplishment, dominance. Who's gonna willingly take up that mantle and carry this division like we have for the past 2 years?
Yeah, I've been working with you. I've been there almost 2 years, so at least definitely since I got there. Probably before. So I will say I'm looking very forward to that match. I'm looking very forward to standing behind that camera in one spot and recording that match. And just all I ask is, please give me advance if you're going to do something that goes into the crowd. There have been too many close calls in the past few shows with other wrestlers. I'm just like, am I about to die?
No, I'm a smart wrestler. I'm not. It's like I'm not leaving this ring. I'm not going.
That would be smart. That would be very smart. And thank you for that. I would say the camera loves you. The camera loves you every time you're on it. Okay. But wrapping this up, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to speak to me today, or tonight, rather. Tonight. However, there's hardly any light in my room, so the days just all meld. For BodySlam.net, I am Morgan Ayers, and I'll see you in a little bit.